Hey gang, it's Megan Barnhart. I am live on the Write with Megan Facebook page, and today I'm going to be giving you a simple recipe for writing a big mistake blog post. So stick around, and if you are just getting into blogging, this is actually a really great blog post to start with. It's great to do at any point in blogging, but if you're new to blogging and feeling like you're not quite sure what you're doing, this will be great for you because I'm going to be walking you through a recipe you can use. Hey, Dave, good to see you. If you're here watching live, please say hello. Hey, Carmen. I'm going to get us shared in the Write with Megan Facebook group. This is a place for people who write for any reason to come hang out, get accountability, meet some writing buddies, and get more writing done. So we welcome you over there. Just do a search in Facebook groups for Write with Megan. All right. Excuse me. So let me know you're here. And also you can start dropping your questions about blog posts into the chat if you've got them. And we'll get started with the recipe. Okay. So why a big mistake blog post? Let's start with that. You've probably seen all over the internet. In fact, it's so funny because, you know, when you have an idea, then you see it everywhere. Like in the last few days, I've come across so many like, don't make this big mistake, or are you making this big mistake kinds of like webinars and blog posts that people are posting. And the reason is, none of us wants to be making a mistake, right? So if you are just getting into photography and you see an article that it's like the 3 biggest mistakes new photographers make, you're going to read that, right? You're like, I don't want to be making those mistakes. So it's a really great way to just catch people's interest. And then, of course, what you need to do is tell them how to avoid those mistakes. So you don't want to just give them the bad news. These are the mistakes. You want to tell them how to avoid those mistakes. Hey, Sapphire. Hey, Carmen. Hey, Omi. Hey, Ingrid. Great to see you. Hi, Rachel. Okay. Oh, great question. Ingrid asked about frequency of posts. So that's something that really depends. Optimal is once a week. If you're writing a blog, optimal is getting posts out once a week. This does a couple of things. It means you always have new content to share, right? So you write a blog post a week, and then you spend that week sharing it with your newsletter, your email list, and sharing it on social media. It also populates your website, right? Makes your website look nice and lived in. If you can't do it once a week, can you do it 2 times a month? So like every 2 weeks, you know, that would be second best. If you can't do that, can you do it once a month? And Ingrid, I would say the most important thing is make sure you give yourself a schedule you can stick to, because one of the biggest mistakes that new bloggers make is overcommitting and then feeling like, oh, well, if I can't do it once a week, then I shouldn't do it at all. Does that make sense, Ingrid? So you don't want to let, what's the expression? You don't want to let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Once a month is a great way to start. Twice a month, great way to start. If you can work up to once a week, awesome. Hope that answers your question. All right, gang. So let me walk you through this recipe for how you can write a big mistake. Let's start with a catchy title. You definitely want to have the word mistake in your title, but there are a lot of ways you can go about this. You can say like, are you making these 3 blogging mistakes? Or it could be, I just saw one from Pat Flynn this morning that was like, the top 3 major mistakes that entrepreneurs make, okay? Which brings up another good point. So you want to have mistakes in there, and you also want to have it really clear from the title who the audience is or what the topic is, right? So that one I was just telling you about is Pat Flynn's was, you know, entrepreneurs. So if you're like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur and I don't want to make mistakes, you know that content is for you. I gave you the example. I actually have a blog post called the 3 most common mistakes. Oh gosh, this is so embarrassing. I can't get the title, but it's like the 3 most common mistakes people make when they start blogging. And Sapphire, you just sent me a link to Marie Forleo has a training going on that's like the stop making these 5 mistakes on your sales copy. Okay. So you should know from the title that it's about the big mistakes and what the topic is. Like, where are you going to be avoiding these mistakes? So you can tell people, stop making these mistakes. You can ask them, are you making these mistakes? You can just be, you know, mine was the most boring of the bunch. The top 3 or the 3 most common mistakes people make. Okay, so any title like that works. Then you're going to get into the introduction of your blog post. The introduction of your blog post has a couple important jobs. The first is to grab people's attention, and we call this the hook. Now you can do this really simply by just relating to the audience you are writing for, right? So the way I start my blog post about the 3 common blogging mistakes is like, if you've been told you need to blog for your business, you're probably like, okay, but how do I do it? And frustrated, and just kind of meeting people where they're at. That's the goal in your hook. So you could say, if you've been told this, you might be wondering this, or you might have tried that, but it might not have worked. Or, hey, maybe you want to get into this, but you're not sure how to do it. So anything like that that just grabs people, meets them where they are. So far, so good? Okay, so maybe somebody will write these in the comments as we go. First, you had a catchy title that had mistakes in it and had your topic and your audience, or one or the other. And then you had your hook. Okay. Your introduction can provide some background information and give people the context. That's really flexible. If this is a pretty simple, straightforward topic, you don't have to give a lot of backstory. You can have a short introduction, totally fine. But the second thing your introduction has to have, and this will be so familiar for anybody who loved essay writing in school, the second thing your introduction has to have is a promise. This is like your thesis statement. So when you were writing essays in high school, probably you had to come up with some clever way of saying, what your argument was. In blogging, you can come right out and say, I'm going to be sharing the 3 most common mistakes people make when they start blogging and how you can avoid them. And in your promise, you really want to, let people know that you're going to be giving them tips for how they can avoid the mistakes. Because what's the point of knowing the mistakes if you don't know what to do about them? Okay, so we good? You got your hook, you got your promise. In this post, you'll learn about. All right. Okay. I'm seeing some questions, and I'm also seeing some comments. Okay, so I will definitely circle back around to questions, just so we kind of stay with the flow of the recipe. But yeah, definitely keep posting them. Thanks, you guys. And I'll circle back around to them. So now you're ready to start introducing your content. Now, in your title, you can go ahead and say the number of mistakes you're going to be telling people about. And it could be 3, it could be 5. If you're writing really short tidbits, it could be 10, it could be 7. The number depends on how much you're going to write about each one, because you want to have a length of blog post that feels manageable, that doesn't give people TDLR syndrome. Did I get those initials right? Too long, didn't read. TLDR. Right, if we look at a blog post and we're like, oh, maybe I'll come back to this later, then that's, you don't want that effect for your readers. So, maybe you're saying in the title it's going to be 3 mistakes, maybe it's 5. Stick to that in your content. Each content block can be exactly the same in format. And it's going to start with a catchy heading. Now, headings are really important. In fact, I probably want to do a whole other video on them and go into more detail, but they're very important, and you need them to be catchy, and you need them to introduce what people will be getting in that section. So could be mistake number 1, or you could name the mistake. Either way, you could do both. Mistake number 1, doing X. Okay, underneath that heading, then you're going to come in with your content. Really simple way to structure the content for this post is to just describe the mistake, like this is the mistake, this is what people are doing, and then say, this is what you should be doing instead. Bingo, you're good to go. If you want to take it to the next level, I like to do, here's the mistake, and then here's what you should be doing instead. And then I say like pro tip, or like take action. And I give a really specific action step that people can take. So for example, in that blog post about the common mistakes people make when blogging, and I'll share a link. It's actually a guest post I wrote for somebody else's website. It's not on my website, but I will share a link to that. So one of the pro tips, or one of the mistakes, is like trying to cover too much and writing a post that's too long. And my pro tip is, after you've gotten your idea, come up with your title. Because if you can't come up with a title, it probably means you're trying to cover too much territory. So it's like a simple, actionable step. Are we good, guys? Give me some emoji. Is this making sense? Kind of going a mile a minute here, so let me take a second. We good? Okay. Then you'll have however many more content blocks you need to fulfill the promise you made. If you're giving us the 5 mistakes or the 3 mistakes. Okay. So you had your introduction with your hook and your promise statement. Then you had your heading, content, heading, content, heading, content. Repeat that, as many times as you need. Then you're going to go into your conclusion. Man, this is just the 5-paragraph essay structure we all learned in high school and probably didn't enjoy very much, except for me, guys. I totally love writing essays like that. But I'm so glad that I embrace that, because I have to tell you, it is the easiest way to write a blog post when you're starting to blog. You don't have to follow this structure, but it makes blogging so much easier if you're like, let me just use this recipe that already works. I'm filling my stuff. Okay, so then we're down in the conclusion. Your conclusion has 3 important jobs. You want to kind of wrap up and give people a sense of closure. So it's like, oh, this is a mistake, but it's okay. You can totally avoid it because now you've got these tips. Then you want to restate what the tips were, remind people what they learned. This is just a really good practice anytime you're presenting information. You want to wrap up what people learned so they're more likely to remember it. Then after you've wrapped up and restated, you need a call to action. A call to action says, hey, if you really, enjoyed this, why don't you sign up for my newsletter so you never miss great information like this again? And there's a link right there for them to do it. Or, hey, if you have questions about this, write a comment or send me an email. Or if you're really struggling with this and you could use some help with blogging, schedule a free consultation. And again, there's a link. So what you're doing is you're taking all the goodwill that's been built up as somebody's been reading your blog post and it's like, oh yeah, this is cool, it's good information, I like it. You're taking that goodwill and you're turning it into the energy of action. And you want to make it really simple. It could be to call you, if you have a brick and mortar business, or if that's the way you want people to get in touch with you, it could be get on the phone with us today and find out how we can help you. So there are a lot of options there. The only wrong choice is not putting any call to action. And don't put multiple ones, because then you take people in different directions, or see if you can avoid putting multiple ones that pull people in different directions. It might even be there's another blog post that you've written that will give people more information so they can go deeper into the topic. All right, so I'm going to repeat the recipe. Then I'm going to go back through and I'm going to grab the questions that y'all have been posting. Thank you for doing that. And we'll take it from there. Okay, so this recipe was catchy title, mistakes in this arena. Then you had your introduction with a hook to get people engaged, get their interest. You made the promise, you'll learn X, Y, and Z. Then you took us through your content. Each content block started with a heading and told us what the mistake is, what people should do instead, and maybe if you want to get fancy, had like an action step or a pro tip. Then you got to the end, so you repeated your content, as many content blocks as are right for your post, and then you got to the end and you gave us a conclusion that wrapped things up and was like, yeah, okay, now you know the mistakes and so you won't make them, and yay, we're so happy. You restated what they learned and you gave a call to action. Woohoo! That's it. That's the recipe, and you have a great blog post. So let me circle back around to comments. Okay. Ingrid had a great comment. She said, yes, I hate finding abandoned blogs. It can really make you think twice about contacting that business. If you see the last blog post is from 2013, my first thought is, are they still there? Are they still operating this? And, it doesn't give you a feeling of confidence in the business. So absolutely, you want to keep things looking updated. Okay. Rachel says, can you write on various topics or should you generally stick with one? Rachel, I'm not sure if you mean in one blog post or generally, so I'll answer both questions. In one blog post, stick to a narrow topic. So for example, after I do this video, I'm going to turn this into a written blog post, and this is one specific topic. So choose a narrow topic for each blog post so people can get like one clear takeaway. in general, when you're blogging, you can write on a variety of topics as long as they're topics that you think your audience will be interested in. So the variety of topics really depends on the people you're writing for. I break a lot of rules here because I write for people writing for business, I write for authors, I write for people who don't want to write for their business and want to hire me to write for their business or somebody to write for their business. So I've got multiple audiences, I've got multiple topics going on. That's probably the worst thing to do. The best thing to do is to have, you know, like a really clear set of parameters around what you cover so that people know what they can get from you. But it really depends on what your audience wants to read. So I hope that answers your question. Dave gave an alternate title, the top 3 mistakes you must make to become a better blogger. I could totally write that post. That's awesome, because it would be about things you need to try and not do so well so that you can learn to do them well. Dave, let me know how much you charge me to steal that idea. Okay. Omi says, how about using the 3 biggest errors instead of mistakes? That is a very interesting question, Omi. I can't remember ever reading a title that was about the 3 biggest errors. Now, there might be some, I'm not saying there aren't, but I would guess that you're mostly going to find them about mistakes. And tell me how you guys feel about this, but for me, error feels more icky than mistake. You know, mistake is like, oh, sorry, you know, I dropped that on the floor, that's a mistake. Error, I mean, unless you're playing baseball, I guess that's exactly what an error means. But error for me has like a more negative connotation. I might be alone in that, but I feel like I see mistake all of the time. So I would recommend going with mistake because our brains are used to seeing that. You know, if we're spending time on social media, if we're spending time reading blogs, if we're spending time on YouTube, we know that formula. The 3 mistakes every new parent makes. We're like, oh, yep. So here's a place where using the formula and using the term that people are already expecting works in your favor, because we're just used to clicking on that and knowing that's something we want to know about. Does that make sense? Okay, Ingrid asked about typical word count. Ingrid, I can't give you typical because honestly, it doesn't exist, but I can give you some parameters, and I hope these are helpful. The absolute bare minimum length of blog post that Google will recognize as like, this is valuable content, 300 words. That's pretty short. I recommend that if you're going to blog weekly, I recommend you go between 500 and 1,500 words. And hopefully that's an amount you can get out in a week. Around 650, 750, that's a sweet spot. That's great right there. It's great for readers. It's great for you as a writer. Blog posts can be on the longer side. In fact, if you look up like, how long should a blog post be, you might get a really surprising answer that says your blog post, if you really want it to be read and shared and be amazing, should be like 2,000 or 2,500 words. I read that and was like, for reals? Is that what people are writing all the time? No, that's what people are writing every once in a while to try to create cornerstone content, to try to create some post that will go viral. They're not doing that on a weekly basis. And honestly, most readers are not going to get through that on a weekly basis. So this would be if you have like the one big thing you want to say and you're going to get it all out. So generally between, you know, like around 650, 750, 1,000, somewhere in there, find your sweet spot. What can you write on a weekly basis and actually get out there? Okay, but Rachel says, oh yes, the 5-paragraph essay. I remember that. I still use that structure from time to time. It totally works. And again, if you're blogging, you have this freedom and you don't have to use the structure, but think about it. Like introduction, content, conclusion. That's pretty universally useful. So yeah, just roll with it. Okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, Ingrid was transcribing the recipe. So I'm gonna pin that comment if you want to follow along. Holly said, I'm interested in political blogging. My focus would be on solutions. Ooh, awesome. So I don't know if you, I don't know if you would find this recipe useful, Holly, like the 3 mistakes that, you know, our Congress is making. But that sounds really powerful. And Holly, I'm curious if you've checked out Medium at all. That's a really neat space, and you might find that if you blog on your blog and then, oh, there's a way to do it, like republish on Medium, but it links back to your blog. You might find you get some good exposure that way. Okay. Hi, James. Good to see you. Okay. Hi, Barbara. Okay, good, Rachel. I'm glad I answered your question. Oh, good. Okay, Dave says I can take his idea and all I owe him is a link. Oh, okay, and Ingrid was asking about stumbling blocks instead of mistake. You can totally do it. My feeling, again, is that I know I see mistake, 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 mistake in everybody's titles. And so I think that we're in the habit of clicking on that. And so I say, go for that. Like, use the foundation somebody else has laid. This is an interesting distinction between error and mistake. James says, I heard a mistake is something you do while learning and growing. An error is a misjudgment made by someone who has the information and skills. Ooh, so accidental versus you should have known better. Oh, okay, another question. Ingrid asked about use of photos accompanying blog posts. You definitely want to have an image at the top of your blog post. And this is something you can easily make on Canva. In fact, I have a blog post about how to make a header image in Canva. But as far as using photos throughout, that's totally up to you and your personal style, what works best in your industry, what you see other bloggers in your industry doing, and yeah, whether you think it will enhance the post at all. So that's really a personal call, but definitely you want to have an image at the top that goes with it. Okay, Omi has a title. The 5 mistakes book lovers make when going to a book sale. Oh, intriguing. I would read that. Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to share a couple of things. Let's see. One is if you want to read the that full blog post about like the 3 most common mistakes business bloggers make, I'm sharing a link to that. And again, this was a guest post I did for SCORE. And it is here. Okay. Are you making these 3 common business blog mistakes? So here's that if you guys want to check it out. And you can see, for those of you who like to learn from an example as opposed to an abstract recipe, that will help you. You'll see the recipe. Now that you've heard it, you'll see it in that blog post. Okay, and oh, I mentioned I have a blog post about making a header on Canva, so I'm going to go ahead and share that as well. Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much for these great questions. Ingrid, thank you for writing down the recipe as I was going. That's fabulous. I pinned that comment. All right, so one more thing to throw into the mix. Now you have a recipe and you have an idea for what you can, you know, the structure you can use for something. But the question is, well, what content should I use with that structure, Megan? And I have a free resource that will help you brainstorm that. And that is like 5 questions you can ask to just brainstorm and brain dump all of the possible content that you could be writing for your blog, for your business. Not just about common mistakes, but about everything. And I was so thrilled to hear somebody who used this resource got back to me and said, Megan, now I see blog posts everywhere. Like, now I'm going through my day. I'm like, I could write a blog post about that. I could write a blog post about that. It was one of the best things I've heard in all of 2019. It makes me so happy because that is exactly my intention. So if you want to grab a copy of that, let's see, you can just go to the homepage of my website and you'll see right in the middle. Let's get those 5 questions to get all of your best ideas out of your brain and onto paper. Okay. There was one more question I think I saw. From Rachel. Oh, okay. How many photos would you say is a good amount in a blog post, and how many would be too many? I tell my interns between 2 and 3, but not over 5, or does it depend? I think it totally depends. I read a lot of business blogs, and also I am not a very visual or graphic person. I'm terribly graphic. No, I just don't, for me, words are far more compelling. So I kind of like skip past pictures. In fact, sometimes I get confused by pictures because I think they're ads. I'm kind of trained, if you read anything on like BuzzFeed or Huffington Post or, news websites that are filled to the brim with ads, I've kind of trained my brain to ignore pictures because I think picture means ad. So that's me, and that's probably a quirk and not how most people are. But what I would recommend doing, Rachel, is looking around at other people in your industry and seeing what they're doing to try to get a sense of kind of what the norm is. Does that make sense? I know it's very vague, but like what people are expecting is really what's important in this case. So for me, reading a lot of business blogs for entrepreneurs, there's not a lot of imagery. Sometimes there'll be an infographic, but there's not a lot. So I'm not expecting a lot. But in other industries, people might expect more. So go take a look around, see what comes up. Okay, cool. And I was trying to share. Okay, yeah, all right. So if you want to go grab those 5 questions to get all of the information you have, because you're an expert, down onto paper so you know what to blog about, go over to meganbarnhart.com and you can grab those questions. And then you'll be on my email list too. So you get to hear from me and get writing tips every week. All right. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody, live. And if you're watching the replay, thanks for watching the replay. I really appreciate all of your fabulous comments and questions. And I will see you next time for more writing tips. And in the meantime, I wish you happy writing. Take care.